Still saying, Doctor? The Twilight of Wolumonde rerun is just about to end, and I wanted to throw out my thoughts and opinions of this event since I've had the opportunity to see the stages once again. I actually started the game right after Code of Brawl, so this was soon after I started playing Arknights. So going into the event mechanics, let's go into the tutorial stage as usual that I do for these to see how how the game portrays its mechanics. So for this event, you'll have to take control of these devices here. So casters can attempt to capture it. If you leave them alone, they will slowly decrease the progress. So as Ansel says, casting arts into a gramophone, I guess is what it's called, and they will try to seize control. So, if you have an operator, or a summon, or basically anything that is under your control on these four corners of the gramophone, you will start the capture progress. So just speeding up a little bit here. So yeah, so now there are 3 operators in the stage here that are adding SP to the gramophone. So if you get it to 100 SP, it will start attacking enemies for 5% of their max HP, dealing arts damage, and every 5 seconds restores 10% to an allied unit within range. So when I first played Twilight of Wolumonde, however you pronounce this, the stages really were quite possibly the most unique gameplay mechanics that I'd come up to, especially at that time, because it really emphasized using operators that you may not bother using for under the majority of circumstances. So for an example, the robot operators, the 1-star operators like Lancet 2 and Castle 3, I think it is the number. You can use them because they don't use any of your deployment limit to put them on the charging pads. And that has really made this event interesting to me. So some notable enemies that you'll have to deal with is, of course, the mages that were shown in the tutorial stage that try to take over the gramophones, but also the normal enemies deal arts damage. Now this is very important because when I first was going through leveling up my account in Arknights, one thing that I had trouble with is when I got to CE5, where you had to face those melee arts damage enemies for basically the first, well, for me, I think it was the very first time. I just didn't really know how to deal with it because I got so used to, oh, only casters can deal arts damage, and now these melee enemies deal arts damage. And since these are the normal enemies that are found in pretty much every stage, well, I don't think they deal enough damage to usually cause too many problems if you have high enough level operators, but it's definitely going to make it so that you'll need to keep an eye on them a lot more than usual. So some other notable enemies are these guys, the Winter Wisp Blood Shamans. And what these guys do is that they're basically the possessed, basically the lizard men from chapter 6 and 7, that they lose HP over time, have really high HP, very high attack, except this is the arts damage version of them. So the other guys would do really high physical damage. Now these guys do really high arts damage. And on top of that, when they're defeated, they explode and also capture any gramophones within the AoE of that death explosion. So these guys are quite possibly one of the most annoying enemies in Arknights, because it combines the Lizardmen abilities, making them deal arts damage, and combining an exploding slug all in one enemy type. And especially on the EX stages, they really made them challenging on that. So I'm going to show a little bit of clips of that. So the other notable enemies that are in this event is Mudrock. So those who are playing now, you will probably know that Mudrock is an available operator if you get them from recruitment. And here is the first appearance of Mudrock, and they first appeared as a boss. And they have regenerating shields, really high HP, really high attack that also greatly increases every time they attack, as well as increasing the defense. And Mudrock also has ranged... Well, they have the melee Mudrock Zealots and then the ranged Zealots, I guess. The melee ones, as well as Mudrock, they get the shields. And you need to deal... I'm not sure if it's damage-based or hit-based, but either way, you need to deal arts damage in order to break their shield in order for them to take arts damage. And since they have lower res, that typically is a better strategy. And then there is the Mudrock Colossus. And currently, the Mudrock Colossus, I do believe, has either the highest HP in the game or one of the highest HPs in the game, as well as having extremely high attack. But they move very slowly, and they have very slow attack speed. So these guys are pretty much what you use the gramophones primarily for, is defeating the Zealots, Mudrock, well, to help defeat Mudrock, and then to destroy the Mudrock Colossuses, because they deal damage based on the maximum HP rather than a flat amount. That is how they can really deal with these guys. So here is a little clip of that. So going over the EX stages, as usual, they pretty much just have harder versions of each of the enemies. So they even have a harder version of the Mudrock Colossus called the Hexed Colossus, and I think the Hexed Colossus has upwards of nearly 4,000 attack and like 150,000 HP, so you either have to have a lot of DPS operators or have a lot of gramophones on your side to take these guys out. And then they also have the even tougher exploding mages. And these guys, they pretty much one-shot all operators except for operators that have high res or very high max HP, like over 3,000 max HP, so your more healthy defenders can maybe tank them. But since they take the gramophones when they die, that causes a lot of issues. And especially on this stage, I did a video specifically on this stage, if I would show the map, that the mages come through here, and if you kill them too fast, they'll come here and take these two, or if you don't deal enough damage to them, they'll come over here and take these. And so they really made this event challenging, for sure. Especially when I got to this stage. And I don't specifically know what the strategy that I even used when I first cleared this. Especially the challenge mode version, I just remember it being very problematic. And I mean, it still is. So they did a really good job on making pretty much the entire event have extra challenge. The X stages also being very difficult for me personally. And then they also made an extra, like, annihilation type thing like they did in Arknights Memoir, where you fight around 200 of all of these enemies over a larger map. So overall, Twilight of however you say this, in my mind, has definitely been one of my most favorite events during my journey of playing Arknights. And to me, I think it is a combination of how unique the gameplay mechanic is, but also how well they utilized it. One thing that I think it was in A Walk in the Dust, the Calcet focused event, one thing that I really criticized on that event of why I didn't enjoy it as much was simply because they had a decent mechanic, but they didn't really expand upon it enough to make it as interesting as I really think it could have been. Or, on the flip side of that, it was a lot easier than some of these other events, and pretty much only the boss carried that event, in my opinion. So Twilight of, again, however you say that, it pretty much showed me, like, this is what an Arknights event can be. That they can come up with a unique mechanic and use it so well. And even events that I didn't really like the specific mechanic for, like the Who Is Real event that focused on Dusk, I thought that the different colors, as interesting as it was sometimes more annoying to deal with. But at the same time, though, I just really appreciate this game's efforts to at least try to make each major event have this really cool mechanic that it focuses on and tries to do its best with it. And sometimes they can do really well, or sometimes it can leave some to be desired, and everything. So this event also, in my opinion, because you can utilize those really low DP cost operators so well with capturing the gramophones, like your 2-star operators, the robot operators and stuff, it really makes you think a little bit more strategically than just having your normal team of operators that you would use on a stage. And then on top of that, this time around, since trappers exist, you can kind of cheese this event mechanic, because traps, for some reason, charge the gramophones, because reasons I really don't know. So if you have either Robin or Frost, 5-star trapper operators, you can use them, place them anywhere on the map, and use traps to capture the gramophones. And Robin especially is actually really useful on stalling the exploding mages. So since they take damage over time, her traps can bind enemies. So that can be very useful as well. So with that, to summarize, this event is one of my favorites. I thought the story was pretty good, but it's just the mechanic and how well that they executed it. It, in my mind, is pretty much a shining example of making the event mechanic interesting, challenging, and while the exploding mages are very frustrating, I think that it was still fun all in all for me when I did it. Was it over a year ago now? And then doing it this second time. So with that, thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day.